Howard, do you know?
Along these lines, as we talk about timeline and process, while the last thing the Historic District Commission wants to do is cost the town any additional money or delay the process, as I alluded to earlier, what we currently have are more general designs, and the town would have to vote and spend the money to do the schematic design so that we would get a more detailed analysis of what a batch renovation and addition would look like before the Historic District Commission would be able to say yes or no. So the process is actually a little longer than it might sound.
Right. Okay. And actually, just as a follow-on, I think maybe Steve, you're ready to answer this, but if both plans are approved, because this is a question that we've gotten in various different formats, if both questions are approved, so someone says, I'm just going to vote for both of them and make sure something gets by, in the end, it goes to, if I understand it, school committee, and then they decide between the two plans. Is that correct?
Yes. And in fact, the school committee is already on record. Our preference, because it's economically more sound, it's educationally much superior, is the Swamp Pond proposal. You know, student flow, grouping of students, everything about the Swamp Pond design is superior to something that will go over 4 floors and require 2 elevators to get from one end of the building to the other. If both are approved, it will be the Swamp Pond proposal that goes forward. If only the Batchelder School plan is approved by the town, there isn't a school committee position, so I can't say definitively. My suspicion is that our need to deal with the problems of student housing would impel us to at least go forward with the plans that we would have to bring to the Historic District Commission. We would have to remove our application from SBAB and submit a new application. We couldn't do that unless we had the Historic District Commission approval first. And I think it unlikely that any design would ever garner the Historic District Commission approval. We're talking about something that requires a minimum of 60,000 square feet. When you get involved with extra elevators and extra floors and all of that, you end up with a little bit more square footage than you would need at Swamp Pond.
Right.
It's just not.
And Howard, since you're here, so he's not speaking for, I mean, you did
Certainly.
make that clear earlier, but I mean, if you want to re-comment on that.
Well, the simple problem that we see, and we looked at this when we looked at the initial proposal, is that when we look at sightlines, when we look at footprint, when we look at the effect on, as Jonathan said, there are 2 issues of open space. There's the historic open space that people have been used to for hundreds of years. And so what happens is all of that ends up being in conflict. When you're looking at making an addition in an existing footprinted space that is so large, what happens is your need to minimize the footprint conflicts with your need to minimize height, conflicts with the need to keep some open space, and the discussion kind of goes around and around. And so the problem that we run into is the amount of compromising necessary on these and other points make it extraordinarily difficult to find some solution that would work. Remembering, of course, that the solution on the table, while it was not a formal vote, we already have a unanimous opinion of the commission that the current plan is virtually unlikely to be fixable.
Todd, I just wanted to add for the renovation of the batch, we have no schematic designs, and it hasn't been approved by town meeting. So this has gone from the idea stage to the ballot. How, I'm not sure, but that's what's happened.
Right, and actually I was going to ask Mark to comment on clarification, because Steve brought up the concept, well, if question 2 passes at the polls, there are some other issues, but one of the things that's been brought up is it didn't pass at town meeting. So what happens if it passes at the polls? What's the next step really at that point?
We will have to go, the town meeting will have to vote to reappropriate that money.
So essentially, that the role of town meeting is to appropriate money.
To appropriate the funds, correct.
Okay. And the ballot is one portion of it, but that's not the appropriation.
That's not the appropriation, and that will set the funds, the value. And town meeting will then have to go ahead again and vote to actually go forward with the building and the school and appropriate the funds for that purpose, which it already said it wouldn't do once.
Right. And in general, basically, when's the next time town meeting, even though it said no, it would get a chance to say yes to that?
We could have a special election a special town meeting over the summer if we chose to do that, or it would be in October.
All right. actually. Yeah, Amy, you had a question?
Yeah, I have
Yeah,
a question
Chris.
for CPC, Chris. I think it's safe to say that neither sites are perfect, either the site for the bat shelter renovation or for Swan Pond. And we're curious to hear from you, what are some of the planning and site issues associated with each plan or concerns?
For us, on the schools, we look for access, safety of access, how the children are going to move from sidewalks to the school, from the buses to the school. Same thing that even the school board looks at. They want to make sure the children can get into the schools safe. How are the buses going to access the schools? For the Swan Pond site, the new development, which is getting to be an older development now, McIntyre Crossing, when that came before the CPC, I wasn't on the CPC at the time, but I was involved in those hearings as a general citizen. But the CPC had the developer make the roads wider, making sure there were sidewalks on both sides where necessary. There was agreement with the developer to give some access through Hannah Graves Way, to be able to access back into the school site without using the old Swan Pond Road. At that time, it was only a gravel road. The Swan Pond Road that's up and back and that directly accesses the pond. So there was some forethought there. There is, you may say, some issue of buses entering and exiting McIntyre Drive, and that's the way that they would gain access to the school site onto Elm Street, being a heavily traveled road. Right now, there is one bus, at least it was last year. I think there still is one bus that drives up McIntyre for the elementary school children today. And I haven't seen or heard of any problem of them negotiating that access. If there's a problem, I guess we could put a duty officer there. There's at least two now, crossing guards that assist with the school crossings for the children, and there's one that actually assists the school buses at Haverhill and Park Street, that he'll actually get out there and stop traffic so that the buses can access, and he actually does it for the parents too that are picking up students. I don't think that it's a real issue at the McIntyre crossing, McIntyre and Elm Street as an issue. And we go back and we look at the batch and the preliminary design. We sat for a site review this past year, and there was questions about how are the children going to get into the school, how are the parents going to pick the children up, what's the proper way for the fire department to access the school to be able to protect the school and protect the children, get them out. And it's doable. We've asked for some changes. We would ask for more to make it safer. But that school is on a heavily traveled road. It makes it a little bit more difficult. The Swan Pond happens to be a site that's remote. At the site itself, there's not going to be a lot of traffic. There's the traffic from Swan Pond area, that neighborhood. Those folks, I would say, probably don't travel very fast down the Swan Pond Road. 2 years ago, they traveled very slowly, probably 5 miles an hour up the dirt road, but now they have an asphalt road. So, access and safety for us, Swan Pond is better. It's a little farther away from the fire station, but hopefully with a new school that's going to have sprinkler systems in it and things of that nature, better areas, better egress out of the building. It will be as safe as a building. It'll be safer as access for the children, I think.
Okay, thank you.
Todd?
Yes, Mike?
To elaborate on that last point, if question 2 in the batch passes and question 3 fails, in order for it to come back because it failed at town meeting once, it takes the vote of the finance committee to be reconsidered within 1 year. And once it's there, it does take a 2/3 vote for town meeting to appropriate that money. to incur the debt to go forward. So it's not just a simple majority.
So to be brought forward, it actually requires some sort of almost sponsorship from FinCom to say
If
we'll
it comes
allow
forward
to go.
within 1 year.
Okay.
So for it to come for a special town meeting or in October, yes, we will have to be asked and then vote on bringing it back. If not, we would have to wait till next April.
Okay, all right, thank you for that clarification. I want to open it up, see if there's anyone on the floor who has a question. Yes, ma'am?
Hi, Ann Foley. I have a question for Mr. Solomon. I'd like to know what Ralph Hannon's Preservation Group's affiliation is with the Historic District Commission or the Historical Commission?
There are two bodies in town that are officially designated to look at historic buildings, historic places, and historic preservation. That is my board, the Historic District Commission, and Barbara Neely's board, the Historical Commission. And they work in tandem. We periodically have joint meetings. Those are the two that are town meeting official sponsored groups that represent the town. There is a long-standing private group known as a Historical Society that has been around 25 or 30 years that does its own projects. They maintain certain buildings in the center and whatnot. The organization that you refer to, Ralph Hannon and Ellen Glue being the primary principals, if you will, of that organization, don't have any official standing within the town. They do have every right to do what they do, but they don't represent any of the official interests that the town has set up to care about and protect and ensure the longevity of these type of buildings. We did have one meeting, I believe it was our December meeting, may have been January, I believe it was December, where Ralph Hannon came to speak to us about where they were in the process. One frustration, frankly, that we have is that was the last time they spoke to us. And as a lot of people know, as a lot of things have been happening, there have been workings, there have been grants, there have been grants, there have not been grants, there have been grants again, and there's some issues around that. One of the things I think it's important for people to know is the one body from the outside that has been brought into this whole fracas is the National Trust for Historic Preservation. As a member for over 20 years, I know this group very well. I also spoke to 3 different people at that organization recently. And one of the things, I don't want to go and rehash a whole thing here, but one of the things that they did acknowledge was that not speaking to the Historic District Commission as the protectors, if you will, of that building, as well as not speaking to the school committee, which is the owner of that building, is something that they regret, is a mistake that they acknowledge, and is something that they would do in the future. We have, as we always do with any citizens group, the one sponsoring today, Ralph's, any others that might come up, we welcome anyone to get involved with us. We welcome anyone to help and attend our meetings. But when a group works independently to try and work towards a resolution that we are trying to work at within the government system, it's better that these things be handled within the system, and outside parties are always welcome to join.
Chris, you want to comment?
Actually, Howard did just fine.
Okay.
I happen also to be a member of the Historic Commission, but Howard did a nice job.
Thank you.
All right, were there any other questions from the floor this morning?
I know they're talking about relocating children in the batch plan, and they didn't do that with the Hood and Little projects. Why would they have to relocate all the children?
Well, I think the scope of the construction project, for one thing, I don't think that based on what they're planning to do at the Batchelder renovation, you can keep the kids there, just the construction site itself. But let me say this too. I think all of us, and this is me personally saying this, all of us spend too much time and energy dealing with this batch rehab plan. It has no credibility. There aren't 50 people in this whole town that think this is a good idea. Our focus, if we're trying to get this Swan Pond School or a school built, should be in trying to convince most of the people in town who don't have kids in the school system this is a good investment in the community of North Reading, just like Ipswich River Park was, just like the Hillview was, just like the library was. That's where our focus should be. Because this other plan, again, I don't think there were 50 people, and it's gotten out of control, really. It's just a bad plan, it's a bad idea, it's been given all the consideration it should have been given and more, and I think that we should refocus our energies on convincing people this is good for North Reading, and that's the Swan Pond School.
Can I come just for a second to your question regarding regarding the Hood and Little project